Hi, everybody. You know what? I really missed you this year. It's been a long year. It's been a long month. It's been an exciting year, an exciting month, but I missed you guys, and it's really good to be here in this room together again. So, sure. And I'm talking to all of you out there in satellite land too, who are just big in numbers but kind of quiet here in San Rafael. We don't really hear much back from you. This is it's quite an honor to be up here, and in fact, I'm a bit nervous because I'm introducing a young woman who is doing amazing things for our water planet, and her grandfather is my hero. And I grew up dreaming about the ocean that Jacques Cousteau showed to us, and the pressure that one feels when having the opportunity to introduce one's hero's granddaughter is enormous. And so I'm a little nervous about that, and really excited to introduce you all to amazing woman, Alexandra Cousteau, who's going to take us on a journey around the world and through her own eyes and her work for our water, our ocean planet. Alexandra spent her life traveling around the world and visiting places and learning from people and hearing their stories and looking at their ocean and thinking deeply about the water issues that we face all over our blue planet. And she's going to share that with us. And I thought, what could I possibly do to express my excitement and give her a gift? So we were drinking wine last night, chatting about it. And we finished this bottle of wine, organic local wine, of course. And I thought, I want to give Alexandra Cousteau some of our water. So I rinsed the bottle out and I filled it with filtered creek water from our creek in Santa Cruz. And so I'm going to pour Alexandra a glass of Mill Creek water here and leave this for her on the podium for her to drink from if she needs it. It'll be right down here. And I'll take this with me for later. It is water, truly, it is water. So without further ado, I would like you to offer Alexandra Cousteau a big, gigantic, warm, revolutionary Bioneers welcome.
My goodness, thank you so much for that warm welcome. I have to say I'm humbled to be here with you today, not only after that introduction, but following the speakers who came before me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for having me and for welcoming me so warmly. Given my family background, one might expect my focus today to be more centered on the oceans and marine conservation. And indeed, some time ago, it definitely would have been. Anyone who has ever taken a peek beneath the surface of the ocean is definitely mesmerized and knows how hard it is to speak of anything else. But like my father and my grandfather, I find myself drawn to a larger subject. Some might say that my passion for conservation of our water planet is a tradition that has been handed down to me by my family. Others joke that I have been brainwashed from birth. And still others blame it on all the hours I spent breathing mixed gas through a regulator at depth. I don't know which one of those it is. And whatever the case may be, I first went on an expedition with my father when I was 4 months old. And in the years that followed, I traveled with him and with my mom and our crew all over the world. And those early experiences instilled in me a love of travel and exploration and discovery. As you can imagine, it was a beautiful legacy to have been born into, one that is rich in meaning for so many generations of people around the world. People who were inspired with passion for the oceans and for protecting the life that lives within it. And I must admit, as you can imagine, I too felt inspired by my family, by my father, Philippe, and by my grandfather to participate in finding new ways to address the great challenges before us, to have a better understanding of what it means to live on this water planet, and to engage fully in the dialogue that will shape the world that our children inhabit tomorrow. I think about that a lot when I have the opportunity to speak about the water planet we all call home. But I want to speak a little more directly today, because I sincerely doubt if I need to make the case for protecting the planet with the audience in this room today. So I want to talk about us, and I want to talk about change. Because if we're going to take seriously the single largest challenge ever handed to a generation of human beings, we've got to change. And I mean we, those of us in this room, those of us leading the charge. So I want to challenge each of us as environmentalists to change our focus, to change our audience, and to change our conversation. Our world is a delicate balance. And just saying that phrase at this conference seems entirely unnecessary. And yet it's so easy to get wrapped up in one's work and forget the importance of a broader focus, or to get caught up in the urgency and overlook the desperate need for long-term vision. Just a couple months ago, I was in Guatemala with the Global Water Challenge. We were there documenting the freshwater crisis, as well as efforts to provide water and sanitation for children in schools. During my visit, I met a young woman named Amelia, who is just 24 years old. And the first thing she thinks about when she wakes up in the morning is water. And she thinks about it throughout the day until she goes to sleep at night. In order to get water, she has to walk up and down steep hills for a total of 5 hours a day. And it's not easy, because I made the trip with her. And I can't believe that she has to do that on a daily basis. She fetches water to drink, to cook with, to bathe her children, to water her small garden, to give to her chickens and to her pigs, all from the same river. And the water in that river is not clean, but it is better than the alternative, which is no water at all. The men of the village have mostly had to go look for work in other places around the country, either in the sugarcane fields or working on the highways. There was a time when they could stay home and grow crops and participate in daily life in their villages, but that was also a time when there was water. And in schools, I sat with children as they waited in line for a cup of watery gruel at recess, if water was available and not too contaminated. And it's easy to come back from an experience like that and jump into efforts to raise funds for freshwater technologies in emerging nations, or to lobby for more aid for healthcare among women and children in the developing world, or to push for stronger protection of the fisheries that are so important for life in coastal communities. And while all of those efforts are extremely important, they alone will not solve the problem. In both the coastal fishing communities and the inland highland communities that I spent time with in Central America, water is a source of sustenance. And without it, the very fabric of these local societies begins to fray. Health worsens, and poverty declines. As those elements in Guatemala, or in any number of societies around the world, decline, the practices that threaten our most vulnerable ecosystems and cultures thrive. No problem. We live in a rapidly changing world where icebergs, glaciers, lakes, rivers, reservoirs, and aquifers have all joined polar bears, Siberian tigers, and mountain gorillas on the most endangered species lists. Yet the incessant demand of a growing and thirsty population, combined with widespread pollution, is threatening to make our diminishing water resources too toxic for our own consumption. Water is Earth's great storyteller. It is the mark of sustainability in a culture, and it's where we will feel the effects of climate change first. We can't afford to make the focus of water just about the fragility of coral reefs, the scarcity of free-flowing river habitats, or the depletion of fish stocks. We can't divide up over protecting fresh water or focusing on the world's oceans. Unless we, those of us in this room, begin to work together to build a shared focus on this blue planet as a single hydrosphere, we will never build the kind of momentum it takes to leverage real and long-term change. My first book, This Blue Planet, will be coming out from Penguin Books 1 year from this spring, and it focuses on the shared story of water. Water in the decline of ancient civilizations and modern ghost towns, the power of water to wage peace or war, the competition for water among wildlife, human populations, industry, and agriculture, the conflict between culture and progress, and of course, my family's story of hope. Based on funding, and I'm sure you all know how fun that is in this economy, I will be launching an expedition this winter to gather stories, footage, and research from around the world. Some of you in this room are working on projects that would no doubt be of great value in creating the broader focus I'm attempting to create on water. And I certainly want you to know that I look to many of you for your input as the expeditions and research come together. In addition to challenging those of us who deal with water issues to take a broader focus, I'm convinced we have to change our audience. For too long, we've focused efforts on reforming policy or pushing for tougher regulation. We've sought out governments for audience. In this country, we go to Washington to ask for help with issues like renewable energy, and we get help in the form of subsidized corn ethanol. Internationally, we pushed for regulations on tuna fishing, and we got dolphin-safe tuna, which simply means that instead of killing the dolphins in nets, fishing fleets continue to disrupt pods and prevent populations decimated from generations of abusive fishing practices from ever coming back. We built up some level of public interest and focused that attention on a regulatory audience to ask for change. The public was sent away believing the issue was resolved, but fundamentally, nothing really changed. We've challenged people to protect something that we haven't helped them to experience. When my grandfather premiered his Oscar-winning film, The Silent World, in 1956, it was the first time most people had ever seen what lay under the surface of the ocean. And it may be hard to believe that just 52 years ago, only a handful of people had ever seen what lay beneath the surface of the waves. Only a handful of us had ever seen the wonders that our oceans hold. Most believed that the ocean floor was flat and that it was populated with terrifying sea monsters. Today, we have a much better idea of marine ecosystems and the creatures that inhabit them. But while the past 50 years have allowed us to learn more about the oceans than ever before, we've also witnessed its most precipitous decline. So while we once thought the oceans were just a surface because of our ignorance of the life that lay within them, my fear is that they will become just a surface again as we extinguish the diversity of life that once existed there. And the same holds true for our glaciers, our lakes, our rivers, and our streams, our aquifers, that hold so much of the water we need to maintain our societies, as well as to nourish the land and forests and the wildlife. It seems that since the dawn of time, we've been trying to understand the relationship between human communities and the larger natural systems within which our societies exist. This is a relationship that we are still struggling with today, and water is perhaps the most critical element of those systems. We live on a water planet. This transparent liquid is the foundation of all life on Earth. It ensures our survival and enriches the cultures of our civilizations. Yet despite the best efforts of scientists and filmmakers like my grandfather and my father, our generation knows little more than his did about the ocean depths or the fragile scarcity of our freshwater resources. And while we debate the challenges climate change will bring to our lives, we have scarcely begun to recognize that water is the vehicle through which climate change will be felt. I truly believe that water will be the defining crisis of the next century. And I also believe that history will be shaped by how we succeed or fail to manage our water resources, both in the oceans and freshwater. It has been said that we will not achieve a sustainable planet until we recruit billions of eager participants. And while we have a long way to reach that goal, when it comes to water, we are rapidly getting the numbers. Already more than 1 billion people do not have access to fresh water, and that number is likely to grow substantially as desertification spreads and climate shifts. In fact, lack of water may affect 3.2 billion people by 2100. Sea levels are rising and threatening to displace millions of people living in low-lying coastal regions around the world. Reservoirs everywhere are at a fraction of their capacity. China is diverting entire river systems to the north to combat the onslaught of desertification. And fully 1/3 of Greece burned last year in the hottest, driest summer in recorded history. Moreover, many experts agree that in the next decade, water refugees will outnumber conflict refugees. Here at home, we are all familiar with the prolonged drought that has ravaged the country for 2 years, causing not only individual hardship, but also hurting local economies and businesses, as well as ecosystems and wildlife. And it is predicted that the Midwestern and Southwestern states are entering a 90-year mega drought that threatens to take us back to the days of the Dust Bowl. To make matters worse, the farm states rely heavily on water from huge underground reservoirs that are being depleted by overpumping. These heat waves, droughts, and other climate stresses, both here and abroad, have contributed to the increase in food and water prices, which has in turn caused the cost of wheat to skyrocket. These environmental pressures are now hitting the bottom line and affecting incomes and livelihoods around the world. So in the midst of these very real, very tangible, very mainstream disasters, we have to take our message to the mainstream consumer. We have to help them understand that water is about more than just what happens between the faucet and the drain, and that reducing impact means understanding water neutrality just as much as carbon neutrality. Today, we must shift our current general perception that water exists in fragmented stasis towards more accurate understanding of water as a system in which we are all downstream from one another. And as the old cowboy saying goes, you never want to drink downstream from the herd. When my grandfather's working to invent the regulator and became one of the first people to dive with the scuba system, he did more than just introduce the world to a new sport. He opened a door that allows people to experience a world they depend on, and one that is still depending on them. We have the opportunity to do exactly the same thing again today. It's time to invite everyone to experience the wonders of the world we're fighting to save, even if they don't agree with our politics or fully support our solutions. I've met with a lot of people that distance themselves from the term environmentalist, probably because they got caught up in the protest signs and failed to see the everyday people behind them. But I am definitely and unabashedly an environmentalist. I'm an environmentalist because I've watched in awe as 2 bull humpback whales competed for the attention of a female 30 feet below the surface of the water. I'm an environmentalist because I've seen innocent children ravaged by waterborne disease, in places where solutions to clean water and sanitation were readily available. I'm an environmentalist because I've stood at the edge of the world and witnessed the beauty of our frozen places, parts of which will be gone before I'm able to return again. And I'm convinced that there are millions who are desperate to join our ranks if we just help them experience the grandeur of this planet. I know that my grandfather grew tired of answering questions about the environment in his later days. He said that he was weary of people ignoring the extraordinary miracles that exist in our world, only to ask why we should protect them. He always wanted to know how we as a society got to the point that we could even ask that question. Just a few blocks from Capitol Hill lies one of the most violent and dangerous neighborhoods in the city, a part of Southeast DC that is known as Anacostia, one of those places that gives Washington the dubious distinction of being one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. But crime and poverty are not the only thing that distinguishes this neighborhood. Its namesake, the Anacostia River, is one of the most polluted in America. More than 1 billion gallons of raw sewage are dumped into this river every year. And yet here, in perhaps one of the most unlikely and challenging places, a group has formed called the Earth Conservation Corps. A project started to recruit local neighborhood youth to help clean up the river and the community, with the understanding that the quality of their environment directly impacts the health, safety, and spirit of their community. The Earth Conservation Corps has an 85% success rate of Corps members who go on to higher education, are gainfully employed, or remain involved in their community to make it a better place. An astounding success rate that also sees a real improvement to the Anacostia River. These young men and women, who've impressed me so many times, accepted the call to challenge the status quo and be empowered to make a positive difference, not only for their environment, but also for their community. These kids of the Earth Conservation Corps understand the point that my grandfather was making. They've learned that to touch life is to know it, and to know of life is to love it. The last 50 years have seen the greatest amount of damage to our environment. And it is the next 50 years that will be the most crucial. The next 50 years, those are our years. The years when we can change our heading and move in a new direction. So my focus today is to create communities of action around water issues at the local, regional, and global level. And I'm determined to stand with each of you as a voice on both green and blue issues. I'm dedicated to bringing the wonder of our water planet to everyday people through interactive expeditions and journals, tours. I'm here to join each of you in any way that I can to champion the causes that help each of us understand what living blue really means. And I'm serious about that. Which brings me to my final challenge today. I challenge us to change our conversation. We've dealt too long in terms of guilt. It's time to challenge people with the urgency of hope. Because I'm convinced that the world is full of everyday people waiting for uncommon leaders to show them simple ways to be remarkable, simple ways to be agents of change, to be bearers of hope. Borrowing a phrase from my grandfather, our water planet returns to us what we give it. If we protect it, it protects us. If we abuse it, it returns the abuse. There are infinite ways that water supports life on this planet. Unfortunately, we have found just as many ways to degrade this precious resource. And yet, in spite of this, I believe that there are solutions to all of these problems, and that we can work together to find them. Because what does it mean to be hopeful? To be hopeful is to cherish a desire with anticipation. If we are uncompromising in our desire for a world where everyone has access to clean air and clean water, if we cherish that desire and anticipate it fully, if we all work towards that goal, then maybe one day it will be a reality. I wanted to end today on a very personal note. There is a letter that my grandfather wrote to my father in eulogy a few months after his death. It was titled, "Pursuing Rainbows," and he wrote of the first time he had taken my father's hand in his to explore the emerald waters of the Shabrumi Reef in the Red Sea. He wrote of the excitement he felt in exploring the beauty of this new world with his young son and sharing his desire to protect it. Then he wrote of a flight they took together and what it meant to him. And I would like to read that last paragraph of that letter to you all here before I close. 3 years ago, I found myself sitting near you in the cockpit of our Catalina, the seaplane you had equipped especially for oceanography and for diving. From years of gliding, hand gliding, piloting planes and helicopters, and ballooning, you had acquired an unusual expertise. Now you were giving me a ride to the Mexican island of Isabela in the Pacific. Taking off in sheaves of water, the whole plane was an extension of your body. The roar of the motors was the expression of your joy. The clouds that dotted your sky were just other forms of water, like our own flesh. I looked at you, my guide in the sky, as I have been your guide in the sea. I saw your shining face, proud to have something to give back to me, and I smiled, because I knew that pursuing rainbows in your plane, you would always seek after the vanishing shapes of a better world. So connected by the common hope and the common dream of a better world, let us embrace the challenge of building it together. Thank you. Thank you so much.